Hello and welcome to our special two-part series on the cutting-edge world of 3D billboards. Today, we're diving deep into the realm of out-of-home advertising, exploring how these innovative displays are transforming the landscape of public space and capturing the imagination of audiences worldwide. I'm Sarah Davies, and I'll be your guide as we unravel the secrets behind this fascinating trend. In our last session, we spotlighted the advances and impacts of 3D billboards in London and Shanghai. Today, we're turning our focus to the vibrant cities of New York and Los Angeles, delving into how these locations are shaping and being shaped by this dynamic advertising medium. Joining us in this exploration are two esteemed colleagues and panelists from the Mill, Jocelyn Birsch, an expert in digital innovation and immersive experiences, and Magdalena, a pioneer in the field of 3D advertising and visual storytelling. Together, they bring a wealth of knowledge and insights that promise to enlighten and inspire. And remember, throughout the session, we'll have a live Q&A in the chat function, so feel free to drop your questions and thoughts as we delve into today's exciting topic. Hello, ladies. Our journey today begins with a fundamental question. What are the key factors driving the escalating demand for 3D billboards in out-of-home advertising? And to answer this, I'm going to turn to you, Jocelyn, our first expert, who brings a unique perspective on the allure of anamorphic 3D billboards.
I think these 3D billboards really bring an element of immersion, kind of excitement and entertainment. There's all of these things sort of combining to make them really fun and interesting and get lots of eyeballs and traction for brands and different experiences. So that's the draw of them. Also, I just think people like 3D content. You know, you go to a 3D film and the thing that feels most exciting is when the content sort of comes out at you and you feel like you're immersed in that content. So I feel like these billboards really are the next iteration of that, or a casual sort of occurrence of that, where you're just walking down the street and all of a sudden you see content that looks like it's coming at you and is sort of enveloping you in a story or a world, which feels really exciting. I think we're just sort of dealing with people's natural response to that kind of content, which feels really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess building on that, let's try and explore how we can push the boundaries even further. So could you share your thoughts on extending 3D billboards to tell captivating stories?
You know, 3D billboards do have limitations in that they are just something that you can see in the physical world, and they have a screen limitation. You know, these 3D billboards become really powerful when they're coupled with a social campaign, and a social campaign extends the reach of that content. So you're getting to see that content not just in the physical location of where it is, but from anywhere, because it's been pushed socially. And I think where we can really start to break barriers or do something really cool and extend stories is having those social campaigns actually add or enhance that billboard. The Mill completed a project in partnership with Netflix for a new TV show called Life on Our Planet. And that premise, that sort of advertising premise, was all about bringing these prehistoric animals into our world and being able to see prehistoric animals in a way that you wouldn't be able to see them. It was almost as if you're watching a nature documentary, but instead of seeing, animals that still exist, you're seeing all these animals that no longer exist, but they're being treated as they would sort of animals still in our world. So I think it was this natural extension of that campaign to bring these animals into our world through billboards. We did this amazing billboard in Times Square, and then we extended that in the social campaign by having the content not just appear in the billboard, but actually come out of the billboard and come into our world even further.
Yeah, I think Jocelyn had a really good point there with, the kind of one great thing to do at the very minimum is to capture these experiences and seed them online, because people just love them and they tend to get a lot of traction. You tend to get so many more impressions just from, social, YouTube, PR, press, getting coverage in Adweek or whatever it is. What I loved about the Netflix project that I worked on as well is they actually took it one step further. So instead of just filming the live billboard in Times Square, which had this giant prehistoric cat kind of breaking the frame, and it looked like it was coming out at you in Times Square. What they did was actually take it one step further and add additional CG to that piece. So just a few additional seconds of CG at the end of the spot that we created. And what happened was the cat actually jumped out of the frame and into Times Square and, into traffic and kind of messing around in present day Times Square. And what we saw online was we got a pretty big reaction from the audience who, were expecting to see the 3D billboard kind of in the confines of the 3D billboard space, because even when things break the frame in the billboard, they can't actually leave, the area, the media placement. But when we had that cat actually leave the media placement and land on the ground, that's when the comments started pouring in on social. Like, what is this? Is this CG? Was this real? Is this a stunt? Is this augmented reality? And kind of the fun of the campaign was we didn't answer, that was kind of just left for everyone to speculate. And I think that was actually one of the key successes of the campaign, where people were like kind of scratching their heads a little bit, like, what is this? And it really built up some intrigue around the campaign and the show as well.
I absolutely love that. And it's actually one of my favorites. So kind of building on that, the idea of 3D billboards as storytelling mediums is truly revolutionary. And with that, I want to shift our focus a little bit to the architectural aspect. So, both of you, beyond more traditional 3D billboards, how are the new out-of-home buildings and shapes enhancing the marketing landscape?
Sure. I think probably one of the biggest developments we've seen in the last year is just spherical spaces. The MSG Sphere in Vegas is really the big one that comes to mind. With that, there's a whole, it's a different shape, it's a different format. And with that comes a whole new set of creative and technical challenges. It's certainly, having worked on some projects for that space, it's kind of brave new world and trying to figure things out as you go. So there are definitely a lot of technical and creative challenges to figure out what's working in that space. But the flip side of that is that there are so many new creative opportunities. The way that creative looks when you are dealing with kind of the corner wrap, almost like geometric square rectangle shaped spaces, the type of creative that works well in that is very different from what might work well on a spherical round shape. And there's just so many new opportunities for different things that you can do there creatively. Like, how can you make the most of that architecture? And my big kind of thing when I work on these types of projects is work with the space and not against it. What looks good in a spherical volume? How can we cheat the illusion of 3D specific to a spherical volume? Don't try to do what you would do for a corner wrap in Times Square. Do something different that really suits the space.
I think to that end, a great example that was done by the Mill is an example that we did in partnership with Autodesk and Marvel for a new film, The Marvels. We got briefed that they wanted to do something for the Sphere. They came to us with this kind of loose concept about having Goose, who is the cat, but actually the true species is called a flurkin, and that cat, when angry or when needed, sort of spits tentacles out of its mouth. So they had this kind of like loose idea that maybe we could do something with Goose. So we developed this concept where you saw Goose, and then he was sort of pawing at a light around him, and then it triggers him to spit out his tentacles out of his cat mouth, and they sort of slam up against the side of what appears to be a glass sphere, and you sort of see the tentacles hit the side and sort of stream down. And I think that that's a great example of using that spherical space to its best advantage. You're treating it like it's a cat in a sphere, and you're treating it like the tentacles hit sort of the sides of a sphere, doing what Magda described, which is kind of using these spaces to their best advantage. And we've actually been, nominated for a Visual Effects Society Award for that work. So I think it's all about using these things to the best advantage of the space, just like Magda was saying.
Absolutely. And one of my favorite characters, I have to say as well. Can always count on cats keeping us on our toes. As a fellow cat person, I can vouch for that. So, I mean, look, those insights are really groundbreaking, especially in terms of, how they're actually transforming physical spaces. Now, I'd like to delve a bit more into the technical side of things. Magda, perhaps, could you elaborate a bit further on the key elements that make a 3D billboard appear truly three-dimensional to viewers?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I think the big thing is think of them as an actual physical space, or you need to create a physical space. Because the one thing I always kind of advise against, or the one watch out I have on these things, is you can absolutely kind of project some beautiful footage on these spaces and you'll have a beautiful spot and a beautiful piece, but it won't look truly 3D. In order to kind of create that 3D illusion, you really have to think of it as an actual 3D space. So some tricks for that are, say you're talking about a corner wrap billboard. So how would it look if you were actually looking into a cross section? Make that corner into a room that you're looking into, and then you already give it dimension. The other thing you can do is create an exterior shell around it. For example, a semi-transparent glass or something fogged up. And then it appears as if, for example, fish in a fish tank. But imagine then something kind of a hand coming out and breaking that glass and breaking that frame. And then that really has the illusion of 3D coming out into the space, which kind of brings me to my third trick, which is frame that space. So create kind of like a physical 3D frame that's framing the interior of that room that you created. And then any elements that kind of pop out beyond and overlap those borders, those frames, appear as if they're actually coming out of the billboard itself and into Times Square or wherever it is. That's the biggest really takeaway is don't think of it as a flat surface. Really, when you think of it as a 3D space, even though in the end you are projecting on just a corner, two flat surfaces, but when you think of it as a 3D space, when you start thinking of it more as a stage, that's when the really interesting things start to happen. And that's when the interesting creative ideas start to come in. And likewise, for people, folks like myself who have worked in more traditional content as well, working on, TV spots and more things that are just ingested on regular 16:9 screens, it's a challenge because you tend to think in TV tropes like camera moves and things like that. And one thing that really breaks down in a 3D space is camera moves. So you kind of can't think that way. So instead of moving a camera, how do you switch scenes? And the answer to that is think the way that people in theater do. Again, your space is a stage. So what's your kind of curtain close and open moment? For example, we've used things like having a fog come into the space and then, having that fog clear away and reveal a different scene. So what are those different types of tricks that you can do to really make it feel like more of an experience versus a film, I guess?
Yeah, and like really understanding the technicalities behind the billboards is crucial. Equally important is seeing how they fit into larger integrated campaigns. So given that, let's discuss some recent projects and their role in broader marketing strategies. So, for example, how have the recent 3D billboard projects such as Samsung's Doctor Strange campaign, House of Dragon, Netflix Life on Our Planet, and our work with Infosys and The Man Who Fell to Earth demonstrated that they fit into a larger integrated campaign?
Yeah, so the nice thing is that when you have a campaign and kind of a campaign theme, once you create those assets, you have those assets and you can use them anywhere. And that's something that we do quite a bit actually at the Mill. We'll work on the billboard, but we'll also work on the TVC and we'll also work on the social piece and, whatever else there is. So that's the nice part is, once you've built that stuff, it's a lighter lift to create other assets as part of an integrated media campaign. So for example, for The Man Who Fell to Earth, we had this beautiful billboard in Times Square that had these kind of faces that formed out of stars in these galactic nightscapes, nice. I guess. And then what we did is we took those same assets and we reused them in a physical installation at the Brooklyn Museum that ran during one of their evening parties. So we had this giant kind of larger than life LED volume, so kind of like an indoor billboard, if you will. But we added a little bit of tech on top of it. We added some gesture recognition. So people were able to move their hands and you take those stars and form them into the faces that you saw on the billboard. So, cool. So then we were putting people in control of the experience. And, that was a much lighter lift for us to do that since everything had already been built for the billboard. And yeah, same thing with the Netflix Life on Our Planet we were talking about earlier. We had already built this 15-second, 3D billboard with this giant prehistoric cat. So all we really needed was 5 additional seconds or so on the tail end of that, of him then just hopping out of his billboard and, into the street. And that's a pretty, I don't want to say that's a light lift. 5 seconds of CG is 5 seconds of CG, but it's a smaller addition when you already have something. And in that way, we were able to create something that felt very new and stirred the pot on social media.
I'll just add to that and just say, like, going back to my earlier point, I do think we're seeing people want to feel more viscerally and intimately connected with IP and with marketing content. They don't want to just passively consume as much anymore. It feels like it's more of a interactive based society, even if it's, swiping TikTok or whatever it is, it feels like people want to be involved. And so I think how we extend these campaigns into sort of more interactive experiences really do help involve the consumer even more into this IP, and very oftentimes very beloved IP. Another great example is we did several elements for the campaign for the first season of House of the Dragons. Our sister company, MPC, did a lot of the dragons for the actual TV show. We were able to take those assets and create a 3D billboard in Times Square where the dragons, roaring and breathing fire over the people of Times Square. And we also created a bespoke AR application, cutting edge AR application that included those elements. You were able to raise a dragon from an egg to a fully grown adult dragon. So in addition to these 3D billboards, we can extend that content so people really feel like they can participate with it, which is, I think, really exciting.
It is exciting, and I think what you've both explained as well is you've highlighted the versatility and impact of 3D billboards in modern advertising, and leveraging technology, which brings me on to the next point specifically. What role has technology integration, such as AR, augmented reality, and CG computer graphics, played in elevating the impact and effectiveness of these campaigns?
We've talked a lot about 3D billboards, and it's really cool. It's really fun. It feels really exciting to have something come out at you and feel like it enters your world. But I think when we start to introduce tech, we can investigate how those pieces of content can expand even further. If we start to introduce AR tech alongside a billboard, we can extend the frame beyond that billboard frame, kind of like what Magda was talking about. I mean, once we introduce AR, the frame can be world scale. It can be, as large as we want it. I feel like AR tech is constantly advancing. It's getting better and better. The way we can digitally map the world and then, affix content to that world is getting better and better. Occlusion's better. Basic mapping of the world and thus content, in the world is getting better. So you really see this potential to take 3D billboards and extend them out even further with AR tech. And there's constant sort of innovation and new pipelines being created for CG, which makes it easier or more effective to create very realistic, photorealistic content. So I think across the board, tech just supplements and adds to how these things can grow and become even more than the 3D billboard environment. There's a lot of potential there. There's a lot you can do. It's really exciting. I think it's really cool. Think about how this content could extend even further.
Once you have the audience's attention with the 3D billboard, it's like, what else now can you do with it? 3D billboards by their nature, I feel like they work so well. People like them so much just because they're cool. It's almost just as simple as that. They're just cool. They're fun. They're neat. They surprise you. They put a smile on your face. It's kind of just that simple, that unexpected moment and that whoa kind of feeling. So once you kind of have someone tuned in watching that billboard, how can you capitalize on that moment even further. One thing I'd love to do that we haven't done yet, but I would specifically on a 3D out of home, but I'd love to build. So, call us. But if you have I keep thinking, we work on so many things for different entertainment properties and IPs. And let's say you have this crazy action scene, for example, spaceships or something chasing each other in this 3D billboard. And you've already surprised and delighted your audience there in person. And they're paying attention. And then all of a sudden they have this QR code to opt into this experience that's augmented reality that's even bigger than the billboard. Well, you've already got their attention. They already like what they're seeing. So they're already an apt audience. And, once they open their the AR portion of it, they're greeted with maybe those ships actually fly out of the space itself. And then they're in a mini AR game where they are actually, inside the film, they become, one of the pilots of these ships, and they get to fly around and play a point and shoot game or whatever it is. But you're really getting audiences then really involved with your IP or your brand in a deeper way. And anytime that you can really get somebody involved in a deeper way, it's just a great thing.
No, I think that's exactly it. There is the shock and awe of the 3D billboard. It's exciting. It's immersive. It feels really fun. But then there's these other sort of avenues of potential to extend that content, extend how people feel involved with the brand or the content or the IP, which, as we've seen time and time again, really does add to the value of the marketing.
Definitely. It's so exciting. And I think, you've both really highlighted the imperative role of technology, and how it can enhance these experiences. I mean, it's absolutely undeniable. Thinking about this practically as well, we've got a number of businesses and advertisers who are tuning in today. What advice would you offer them if they wanted to integrate 3D billboards and advertising, into their marketing strategies and to create more immersive advertising campaigns?
I mean, I think there's an easy approach, to get into creating this content. A 3D billboard is actually a fairly light lift in terms of creating content that feels immersive and encapsulating of your brand. But I do think that content is only as good as the social campaign that coincides with it. So, thinking through how more eyeballs get to view that content is a huge part of that play, that marketing play. And then, trying to think about how you break boundaries and extend content even further so that it feels immersive and interactive. We have all these new sort of different shapes and mediums and architecture, as you mentioned, cropping up. How can we start to push that stuff even further? How can we be creating content that hasn't been made before on that content? It feels like people are sort of piling on to create content for the sphere and just think about how that building can be used. And I think the more we start to push, the more eyeballs, the more and more eyeballs that we'll get on that content and start to really think about how it can be used in new and inventive ways.
Yeah. To build on that, I think my advice would be to jump in now as soon as those, the sphere comes to mind, for example. It's a brand new space, just it hasn't been around that long. So there hasn't been that much stuff that's been done on it, which means that your brand or your IP could be the first to do some different type of creative, something unique, something that's never been seen on that space before, just because of the newness of it. And, obviously the longer a different type of media is around, the more creative runs on it, the harder it is genuinely to do something truly fresh and innovative and that's never been seen before. So my advice would be to just, kind of get in there while it is the Wild West and there is so much unexplored territory, and really to do something unique and original that captures attention.
Absolutely. So you heard it here. Jump on that bandwagon.
As a final kind of thought, I do think the trends that we're seeing in advertising lean towards more immersive spaces cropping up and having people feel more sort of viscerally connected and just truly connected, physically connected with IP and brands feeling like you're participating with that brand is a really powerful thing for a consumer. And I do think we're seeing this trend sort of, move it in that sort of pathway or avenue where people are starting to want to do more things in more immersive spaces and feel like they're, interacting with IP and brands in new ways. I think the further we can push that, the more we'll get, new attraction, new excitement, new sort of potential.
Wow, how exciting. And what a journey we've embarked on. Short journey today, but a really exciting one. So look, as we wrap up this part of our thrilling exploration into the world of 3D billboards, we've obviously focused on the vibrant cities of New York and Los Angeles today. I just want to express my heartfelt appreciation to our incredible panelists, Jocelyn and Magda. Your insights have not only enlightened us, but also added depth and colour to understanding this revolutionary advertising media. To those of you tuning in, remember, today is just the beginning. We've got more ground to cover, more insights to uncover, and more creative horizons to explore in this ever-evolving world of 3D billboards. I'm Sarah Davies, your host, and it's been an absolute pleasure guiding you through today's session. Thank you for joining us, and keep your eyes peeled and your minds open, because in the world of 3D advertising, seeing is just the beginning of believing. Until we meet again, keep pushing the boundaries of imagination. Goodbye for now.